Yeah, here we go. I got to figure out a smoother transition out of that music I had playing. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Second Order Chaos. My name is Rando, and this is almost like my official kickoff of this thing I'm trying to do, my little interview show. And I want to really kick it off with the man himself, somebody that I'm a super fan of. That I was like, yo, I have to talk to you on stream because I've just been a fan for so long. Mr. Jack Rhysider.
Hey. Now we go back a little ways, right? Like you messaged me on Twitter like, I don't know, over a year ago, and we've been going back and forth. You've been helping me like research some of this stuff.
Yeah, a little bit. I had pinged you because I started listening to your show, which is at DarkNet Diaries, and just fucking fell in love with how you do things and how you're almost, I want to say, and this is probably not the first time you've heard this, but like your NPR-esque delivery of interesting hacker things, right? And I was like, I used to do radio back in the day. I used to do, show prep and interview bands and things like that. And aside from like doing research and things like that for security and stuff, I said, well, let me see what I can do to help. Because you had mentioned, I think during one of your early podcasts, that like you were a solo act of putting all this stuff together. So yeah, I had reached out and you're like, all right, cool. I could always use a hand with some stuff. So that was super cool. I was happy that happened.
Yeah. And so you've given me some good, like you've done a little bit of research and given me some good questions to ask potential guests, and have I've bounced a couple episodes off you to listen before I go live. And I just got to say thanks for the help you've been giving me so far. And then, when we got to DEF CON this year, I looked for you and I found you. You were gooning.
Yeah.
And I had to get a great big hug from you because it was such a cool moment to finally meet you too.
Yeah, that was and like we all know from anybody who's been to DEF CON, like even once trying to plan anything with anybody or locate a single it's usually you run into the same person over and over again, and it's a person you never really thought to locate. And luckily we just it happened to work out. And then one of that is actually us when we walked around a little bit, because I just had dinner and we finally synced up and we walked around. We went to some of the villages, Jack and I, and dude's just rolling around and of course doing his thing, and he has a whole bunch of stickers that this is one of my favorite stories. I love this so much. You had a whole bunch of stickers and you're almost like an expert card player, the way you fan them out on the table. And I was like, God, you've probably had practice at this. And we walked around. We probably walked for like 4 minutes or something around the perimeter, and we came back around, and there was already some dude who was there who was scoping up your stickers, and you struck up a conversation with him. And you're like, hey man, you dig that show? And he's like, yeah. You guys, I've turned my entire crew on, my entire work crew. And you're like, oh well, I'm Jack. And the dude just lost his mind. And you sat there and you talked to him for a few minutes, and I just thought that was great. I thought that was like a great like kismet kind of story.
Yeah, it was like that all of DEF CON for me, and I just had like a smile on my face the whole weekend because I just met so many fans and it was such a great time. I loved it.
Yeah, and although you are very cognizant of your own OPSEC, which I can appreciate because you cover some pretty sensitive stuff sometimes. But you were very nice about it too, and people really got it. They're like, yo, can I get a picture with you? And you're like, nah, not really. But it wasn't like a dick thing.
Right.
You were just rocking around, and like I can totally appreciate that, especially a place like DEF CON, because that's like more accepted to be like, nah man, I don't, even regular civilians, we don't want our pictures taken.
Exactly. Everyone gets it at DEF CON. You don't have to explain like, well, this is a reason. No, they instantly know like, okay, yeah, you don't want your picture out there, that's fine.
Like have you ever gotten people that kind of push the issue on you because they were just super fan? Like are you at that point where you're getting like those super-ish type fans that are like, oh come on man?
Yeah, there was some that just wouldn't let know. And so I was like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna put my hand in front of my face and then we can do it. And they're like, okay, that's good enough. So I would either put like my sticker in front of my face, or my drink in front of my face, or my hand or something to cover my face, and then do it. And it's because I watched this when I talked to this woman who did a talk about at the what's the one that isn't recorded, the Sky
Sky
Talks,
Talks.
and she explained how to defeat some of these facial recognition cameras, and they look for the dark spots in your face. And so if you can kind of create or cover like a good significant part of your face, it usually does good enough for the camera recognition, so that AI doesn't automatically detect you. So just sticking your hand in front of your face is definitely good enough to defeat a lot of this automatic stuff. And yeah, I'd just rather not have my face out there, because you're right. I'm digging into some of these things that maybe who I'm exposing doesn't want to be exposed, and it's just nice to be on the safer side there than not. And it's too hard to put the genie back in the bottle once I undo it.
Right, for sure. And I even saw a couple of pictures that had been out there that were kind of like getting towards the border of like, oh, you see, like I got worried for you. Like I actually was like empathizing with you. Like I was like, I need to protect Jack. That's getting too close. Like they're gonna find him. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, who's they? Like that's there's. Have you gotten any? Have you ever gotten reached out to by like a subject of one of your podcasts? I mean, I've listened to. I'm behind on purpose about 5 episodes because I hate wait I hate waiting for them. So I save them up. But I've heard all but like 5. Have you ever been reached out to by some like a subject of your things that are like, hey man, what are you doing? Piss off. Stop talking about this.
No, not yet. And I'm pretty impressed with that, because I've done things like I've talked about Israel and Iran and porn, like in detail, like for an hour. And not once have somebody come out and said, you're getting it all wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. You're barking up the wrong tree or something, right? It's always been, I've tried to stay neutral and try to represent this issue as best I can with as much data points and information, to the point where I think people just either know I've done my best, or they know that I've been fair enough at representing it. So there's the typical complainers, right, that are just going to complain about everything, and they really haven't been there. But you're right, there are some people that are like, wait a minute, he's talking about us. And the thing is in stories like that, I really try to not be the first journalist to cover this, because then I might get some people mad at me. But when someone like Reuters or New York Times already has done issues about this, then they put their hat in the fire first, and I watch to see if it got burned.
Right.
And if it didn't, I'll throw my foot in too, right? So I've been kind of safe on it so far, but there are some stories that I'm a little concerned about coming in the future here. Particularly one I'll tell you about.
Yes.
I'm looking at, I've been seeing something that really scares me. Like it really, really bothers me, and I don't hear anyone really talking about it. And that's except to like a few small people, in little circles. But it's like the domestic spying on like partners. Like, so the husband is spying on the wife,
Sure.
or ex-boyfriend or ex-boss or something is really taking it in a terrible way, or is taking the hacking to this person. This usually it's a woman is hacking her phone and her laptop and everything, and getting in the cameras and all this stuff. And it's so scary, because we always look at us like, oh, well, we're not going to be target of a nation state hacker. Well, you know what? Your ex-boyfriend or something could be like the one who gets so mad at you that decides to spend thousands of dollars to ruin your life for the next 5 years. And it's crazy how much of this is going on. And some of the stories that I'm getting into go pretty deep into talking about some of these guys that are just so obsessed with ruining some of these women's lives. And I've been interviewing some of them, and I think some of the stuff might get exposed when I do that. And so if these guys are already spending all this time to hack into these women, what could they do to me? They could totally like switch their attention to be like, screw you, Jack, I'm gonna ruin you too now, because you're trying to get help this woman or do something. And yeah, it's a really scary, like sometimes I'm looking at stuff like, whoa, this is a scary topic. There's a couple others I could talk about too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, go right ahead, man. What do you got coming up? Tell us.
yeah, there's some other stories where like a journalist has investigated this potential suicide of a hacker, and that journalist ended up dead as well. And so I'm like, wait a minute, this is not cool that the journalist who investigated the story died accidentally. Something fell on his head, and
Yeah,
it was ruled as an accident.
a bullet.
So yeah, there's just weird things like that that just never, I don't know, I get really nervous doing it, and I really have to make sure that I've got things all set up right and nice and safe before publishing stuff like that.
Yeah, and speaking of that, the whole like, you know, boyfriends, ex-husbands breaking on the phones and stuff. There's a group now. I'm not sure if you ran into them at DEF CON, the Badass Army.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
th-
did.
that has done a lot of that work with like that, like revenge porn, and actually they're, you know, they're 501c, I think, and taking these people to court and things like that. And some of the stories, just talking to them about the lengths that they will go to. I often get from like friends' parents and things like that, like, oh, like Russia's gonna hack me, and I'm like, nah, bro, they're hacking your bank and your collateral damage, and that's kind of this like ephemeral thing that like you can't really help. But this is actually way scarier, because now not only do you have like this localized capability, but you also have passion involved in it, right? You have hurt feelings, you have, you know, history of years down the drain, and technology, and that's always a toxic, super dangerous mixture.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the people who have kind of come out and tried to stand up for these people, they've been, you know, hit pretty hard with some online harassment too, to
Yeah.
try to see this. So
Well, because like everybody can be, they can be anonymous, and, you know, use Signal, use Tor, 10 proxies. But yeah, like, and it's I mean, I've even been bullied by people in in the infosec community. Like, it's even happened to me a couple of times already, and those are people who would really know how to try to fuck my life up. Oh, there's a thing in the Twitch chat. Chilibot3 says there's also Operation Safe Escape, who help people escape abuse and stalking situations. So,
yeah, and Eva Galperin has been doing some work as well to try to get some of these domestic surveillance apps to kind of like keep an eye on where your husband is and kind of stuff. There's these apps in the marketplace, and she's been making these flagged as spyware and malware in the app marketplace, as before they weren't, and they were considered just safe apps. And it's like, no, you've got spyware on your phone, and you should know that.
so and I'm not going to ask you the question, because again, I super respect especially your privacy, because I really like your show, and I don't want you dead. So I'm not going to ask you if you can commiserate with this, but trying to wrap your head around it. I know, speaking from my own personal experience, like I have a 4-year-old son, right? Like, absolute linchpin of my life, and I can see a time where I would have the urge, when he's older and enough to go get himself into trouble, thinking, maybe installing this kind of tracking thing on him wouldn't be that bad. And then I'm like, what the fuck are you talking? Like, what are you doing? Stop it. Can you commiserate with that kind of feeling of wanting to keep people safe? Like, that's kind of a weird, it's kind of a weird moral question, especially like when it comes to hackers. Like, can you can you see a side where you're like, well, I might do that. Should I have children? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a really hard thing to figure out. I don't know of any good solution there, because there's a couple episodes where there was teenagers hacking, and their parents were like putting all these, filters and these blocks on the local network, but the teenage is so much more advanced than the parent and is able to get around it like so easy. So it's like, yeah, it might work for a 4-year-old, but when at some point it's not going to be effective. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really hard thing to solve. And I don't think enough of us in the security space are figuring out how to solve these things for parents and schools to be a safer I mean, it's so weird to see like kids these days, teenagers doing things like swatting and other hacking, like DDoSing each other in video games. And it's like,
Yeah,
what, whose fault problem is this that's supposed to be solving this, and why aren't they doing something better at this to solve this? It's really a situation it's hard to figure out how to solve.
yeah, because like we always go back to talking about like, well, like we're all still alive, and we didn't have this when we were growing up. Like, you know, I'm in my 30s, and for the sake of misdirection, I'll just say you're probably 19. But you know, like, oh, we also didn't have the capabilities back then of people to get at us like they do now. They didn't have that level of harassment. They didn't have that level of tracking. So yeah, that can get to be super super sticky. There's somebody else in the chat. Arl Lunden said tracking apps. It's a good point. They do have good use cases. You know, there's which I actually didn't think about, like elderly with Alzheimer's, special needs children, that kind of thing. So it's like one of those things. Whenever anybody releases like a new tech or you know a new piece of hardware that's for research and for hacking, you can't control how people are going to use it, and just hope that the good outweighs the bad.
Yeah, and I do want to comment on Mandibelis about Survivatrix. I have spoken to her, and yeah, she's been a victim of some of this abuse as well, and it was harrowing for her. And I'm going to try to capture more of her story to understand more there. And that's a good example right there, is someone who went through a lot, and then she was a victim of being, stalked and stuff like that. And that's how she came into the infosec space, so that because she wanted to learn how to secure her computer and her phone and her laptop and everything. So she wanted to learn more about infosec just to stay safe in the world. And that's how she got into the infosec. And I met her at DEF CON. So it's like, it's interesting how people arrive in these in infosec as well.
What's your take? That's actually a good segue into what's your take. Recently, there was and I forget what municipality it was. I forget what town it was. But the those Ring doorbells being able, somebody, it's I don't know if it's a thing or it's going to be a thing or somebody's trying to make it a thing, of having law enforcement during an emergency, quote unquote, during an emergency, being able to essentially go through a back door on those, getting access by Ring, which is now owned by Amazon, and being able to track people via those cameras. Is that as shitty of an idea as it sounds?
I think so. And the thing I always try to do is kind of step back here and kind of skip out of I gotta get out of our mental mind space for a second and kind of look at it. Like when we were growing up with the internet, when the first person was like, "Oh, give me your credit card to buy this thing," we're like, "That is a stupid idea. I'm not putting my credit card on this website," right? And so we really balked at the idea. But now today we're like, "Oh yeah, here you go. Here, I have 3, 4, 5 of them. I don't care." And it's totally different. And you know what security is? It's doing business in a chaotic, crazy environment. And and so you have to learn how to still secure your stuff in this crazy environment. And so that's why kind of security is so prevalent right now, is because we're trying to do things stupid like touch the sun, and we need a way to do it safely. And so we have the security teams to come show us how to do it right. And so there's been a lot of stupid things in the past, but now we're used to it. And what I always look at as well is, what's the benefit? Does the benefit outweigh the negative here? And like, I don't have any of these voice command things in my house, like Siri or Echo or anything like that, because I don't see the benefit to them yet. It's just not there for me to do voice commands to change channels or whatever. I don't even know what it does, but it's just not there yet for me, so I won't do it. But there will be a point where it'll be so advanced that I'll be like, okay, there's too many cool, not cool, but like really, really useful things for me to have, that I think I'll do this voice command thing. And at the same time, yes, it is creepy for me to have some internet listening to what I'm saying all the time. And I'm going to have some, I have to get over that. But when the benefits really outweigh the negatives on that, then that's when it becomes really, you know something that's potentially that we want. And I don't know if this Ring doorbell is actually going to give me more benefits personally if I allow the police to be able to turn it on, or if it's benefiting someone else, or how that is, right? So I always want to look at it with those kind of eyes when I'm looking at new technologies like this, or ideas. And I think even after looking at it like that, I don't like the idea of this being of it being there. I still don't like it. It still sounds too creepy for me.
Yeah, my threshold for worth it is quite a bit lower because I like being able to tell Alexa to play scary music in the house when my wife is sleeping everywhere. So I mean, that's kind of my risk appetite. I'm probably a bad I'm a really bad proponent of privacy in that, or I'm nobody's role model when it comes to privacy because I like my stuff to work in my office, in my quote unquote studio. I can do all my lighting and shit like that. So there was an interesting quote. So right now I'm reading this bio of Henry Kissinger. Really super complicated dude. Might be the Antichrist. I don't know, but he had a quote, or something was his. Somebody attributed a philosophy to him that he would prefer an unjust society as long as there was order over a revolutionary society with no order. And on its face, I was like, that's monstrous, and that's that just that's not good, not good. That sucks, and that's kind of like totalitarian. But then I start thinking about it, and in the grand scheme of how society is, and I think, well, like I can almost get inside his head to see where that would be acceptable because he was a big proponent of order and just having things work. He didn't care if a lot of it was fair. So just one of those interesting things that you hear at first and you're like, well, shit, no, you're a monster. And then you're like, well, I don't know, maybe you had a point. Um, so yeah, all this stuff just can get and it can get just run away from you so quick, man. Because we all know how quickly these things can be backdoored. If you let one person in, you're letting everybody in.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what's fascinating about being alive today is the fact that we're having to deal with all these novel issues. These are issues nobody's ever dealt with in the course of all of humanity, of whether or not to give police cameras to everyone's house, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's such a fascinating time to watch us kind of navigate through it. And I have this like weird belief. I don't know, I don't have really real basis on it, but it's like I feel like whenever like a new thing that can be abused gets introduced to society, it gets abused quite badly for like the first generation, which is us still, right? And
right.
so I mean, like alcohol, we got alcohol in the US, we screwed it up so bad. And that got prohibition, right? And so it's like, oh well, you don't get that anymore, and we lost it. And I think we're still kind of like screwing up so bad in technology that something might eventually just roll back and say, you know what, we've gone way too far. We need to undo some of the stuff that we've done. And we're going to lose a lot of the freedoms that we have today because we just aren't doing it right. We're being very poor ushers for some of the technology in the world. Um, and so, maybe like 2, 3, 4 generations from now, we do have this figured out, and we understand the dangers of being online and the dangers of all this stuff, and learning how to properly keep your delete your profile online if that's the law, right? Like there's the California laws coming in, and the European laws about you can delete your you can forget who I am as a customer of your site. Like, I don't think that's being implemented properly yet, right? But
Yeah,
imagine like 100 years from now, is that going to be properly then, or is it going to be totally out of control? It's really fascinating to watch it all unfold.
yeah, and at that point where we try to roll it back, what? How far are we rolling it back? Like, what's now acceptable, right? Like 4 years ago, some of that stuff in politics would have been like, oh my god, like this is never gonna happen, and now we're just like, meh. At least it's not this thing. So,
I mean, I think I have this horrible doomsday imagination in my head where some crazy politician stands behind child pornography and terrorism and just says, we're putting up a border on the whole US, so we're not going to be able to use the internet for the rest of the world. We're going to just be on the US. And I think that could be like the worst of it, right? Is just totally, or what some of the um some of the other restrictions are about, like the different tiers that you have to pay for to get access to certain websites and stuff. Like if stuff like that starts coming out, that's where it's going to just be horrible for us. And so that it could be the worst of it, and then it kind of rolls back to say, no, you know what, we need to have this open for the world, because it's important for us to see what our neighbors are doing in different countries and to exchange ideas. That's the whole point of the internet, is to communicate and to help each other. And so it'll be a wild ride for the next 100 years for sure.
So does doing research for your shows make these feelings better or worse for you? Like,
Oh man.
or is it kind of like a really bad like teeter totter where you're like, no, I'm learning more stuff, and okay, now I'm encouraged, and now we're all screwed.
Yeah, I mean, there was a sense where I have this little bit of me that likes a little bit of chaos in the world and watching the world burn a little. But man, it just seems to be getting worse than ever with the way that, I mean, I don't even look at I look at cyber weapons now as like disinformation weapons, right? And it's just to be able to use social media to change someone's mind and to make them more angry about something, or make them dislike a certain person or something. Like that is like, that's a cyber weapon, right? Like to meme someone to the point where they were on the fence to now they're like really believe this one thing in the world. What the heck just happened there? These were just funny pictures, and now you've changed your beliefs. And what like, how do I like, there's there's just a new level of stuff that's going on that I'm watching, unlike anything I've seen before. And that's the kind of stuff that scares me, is all the misinformation out there, and seeing companies being hacked and really not having any implications after that, because a year later the stock price is higher than it was and everyone's still buying the product. Like, what? Like nothing happened. Okay, I can be okay. Like what? I don't know what happened, right? But then seeing like the world just kind of crumble, and us going at our throats, and being divided, and hating each other, and just rallying behind fear instead of the things we really are passionate about, is just, that is really scary to watch unfold. That's the scary part. It's just like it's really things have just almost gotten out of control for me, in the way that the way people are communicating online. It's just so gross sometimes.
It really is. But lest we want to like throw ourselves off a bridge in the first 25 minutes of this thing, out of all the things that you've researched, this was a question from a Jedi Day. Like, what's been your favorite episode to research that either was fascinating or at least didn't leave you feeling horrified?
Yeah, the Xbox series. Did you catch that one yet?
Yeah, dude, that was so good. I listened to that on the way to and from Derby.
So one of the people on that one reached out to me and said, "Hey, I got this episode for you." And I was like, "All right, what do you got?" And so he showed me his indictment and all this stuff, as one of the people in that store. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is huge. I can't believe this." And so I got I got a big piece of paper out, and I started writing the timeline. Well, that piece of paper wasn't big enough, so I had to like scotch tape another piece of paper to it and put like the timeline bigger. And before I knew it, I had like a giant poster of just notes for what this story was. And it really took me like 6 months to get through this story. It was so sticky and complex and deep, but if I get through it, boy, I was so proud of myself for getting through it, right? To get all those voices pulled into one episode, and to edit all together, and to make it coherent enough to make sense, and a nice long one to really let you, take a long drive or whatever. It was my favorite one to work on, and I'm most proud of.
How has your radar become for detecting bullshit from when and I know that it's much the same in any kind of like security analyst role, and doing a timeline and figuring out ground truth and what's real and what's not. How has it become sharper? Because there are, and this is a question that I'll kind of get to later, because some of your episodes, like Manfred and those, like, have very polarizing figures in there. And I even messaged you on TM, and I was like, yo, I hate this person. I hate their voice, and I hate their attitude, and I can't tell if they're lying or if they're being truthful.
Yeah, that is a good one. Yeah, I think my BS radar is better because, and this is what kind of puts me in a unique situation, right? I really like this whole audio storytelling journalism format, but I don't know anything about audio storytelling journalism, period, right? I know nothing about it. What I know is security. For 10 years, I was a security engineer working on the firewalls and the IDS units and the SIMs and stuff in my network, blue team. And so I listened to a ton of podcasts, and I even listened to Rally Security podcasts for quite a while. And I was just like, okay, I'm hearing all the possibilities in the world, and I'm consuming all these things, and I'm taking all these courses. I took some SANS courses, and I had like a half dozen or a dozen certs at the time. And so I really was sharp at what was possible in the world, right? And so when something does come to me where I'm like, nah, there's no possible way for that to happen, I can immediately throw it out. So that's what that I do have a good radar for, whether or not there is a possibility here. And I have the, I have ways of asking questions to, like, walk me down that hack. What were some of the commands that you had to do that, right? And so I want to hear if you like know what you're talking about as well. And I really, if there is a story that I can corroborate, I'm going to look at news sources and that kind of thing, and confirm that this is true. And I have indictment records. I've got other people who were there. I frequently call people up and say, tell me about this person. You're his friend or his parents or something. And I've actually called people's parents and friends many times to get the story right. So yeah, I have to go through all that, and it's a lot of work, but it makes it important. It's very important to me that, like, one of my worst fears is for people to say, dude, you don't know what you're talking about here. You didn't get any of this stuff right.
Right.
And
Like swing and a miss, noob.
yeah, absolutely. So I really, 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 really double check like all my work, and everyone that I talk to has been verified or fact checked in some way. Because of other people I know, or their social status. If you've got like 20,000 followers on Twitter, and I can look at like the last 10,000 posts you've made and see how you're interacting with community. Like, there's all these things that I can do to look up everyone there. And there's some stories that come to me that I'm like, no, there's nothing I'm going to do with this one, but thanks for telling me. And then
right.
And then there's others that are so crazy that I don't believe they're true, but there's so much evidence to back it up. And I'm like, how in the world did this actually happen? This is so insane.
I just had this waking nightmare of like having you be like my job interviewer, and like, what command did you do this and how did you do this? Like, that's my worst fucking nightmare. That sounds like the job interview from hell, where you're just putting me through my paces, because I've had those. We have a lot of awesome questions. I'm so happy that everybody is in the chat right now, because they're asking you some really, really great questions.
Right.
Mandibulus. Yeah, sorry, man. I'm gonna butchering your name. How many people do you end up speaking with, like, average per episode? I imagine that probably varies pretty greatly depending on the content, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, so I like to pull in, and I don't like to pull in an expert either, right? I like to pull in somebody who was there. Give me on the boots on the ground experience of what you went through, because to me, that's the most exciting part, that human element. And so when I have that, then you start getting other characters involved, right? Your boss or your coworker or the victim or something, right? And so I'll ask, can I reach out to the policeman who arrested you or something, or your girlfriend or something? Can we talk to them? So I'll usually bring in one or two other people. Oh no, I won't bring them in the show, but I'll call them up and see if I can, just confirm that this story is true. So it's usually a couple phone calls, and then if there's articles that support it, like this latest one, I posted something like 30 articles that I had to reference for the episode. So I didn't really call anyone. I just did a lot of online research. And I didn't interview anyone for that one either, because everyone else has done the research. All the journalists and security researchers already did all the hard work. So I just had to kind of pull it all together.
How do you get reticent about, so you're doing a show about an ex candidate, whatever, and that person is on board with you doing the show, but now you have to corroborate all this stuff. Have you ever gotten just shut down by other people that you're trying to corroborate the stuff, and then have you been able to like cajole them into actually talking to you, or have you just gotten completely stonewalled? Like, how do you kind of get around people that might not want to speak to you at first?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of times where, especially starting out, I was like, I am so nervous to ask this person about the experience that they went through. That was probably the worst experience of their life, right? Like, why should I have them retell this when really it's just for my own listening pleasure and stuff? Like, it just doesn't, like, it's not important enough to me. Just keep it to yourself. But I asked anyways. And then by the end of the interview, they're like, this was the most, I was like, so much is lifted off my chest from listening, from telling somebody this. Nobody's asked me like this. Like news reporters have interviewed me, but they never asked me like, what was it like sleeping that first night, and what was it like going to school the next day? Like nobody cares about that part, and that here you are getting into it. And so it just felt really good to have someone finally talk to me about things like, as a human, what I had to go through and all the stress and the terribleness of it. And so people really feel it's like cathartic for them. They get through it and they feel better, like it's a therapy session.
For,
And so
no, continue.
when I get through it and I say, hey, is there someone I can talk to, at that point they're like, yeah, I mean, who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to my dad or what? Like, it works out because we've gone through this thing. And some people are like, well, my parents don't know, so you can't talk to them. And I'm like, well, you're under 18, so I can't I can't do anything until I get your parents' permission. So we're just gonna do nothing. And they're like, well, okay, fine. And then so I get to talk to their parents or something.
What's
Yeah, so it's weird.
what's your and yeah, and that's part of the reason why I love interviewing people so much, or just sitting down even off books and having conversations, because I want the details that would be in like a protagonist's mind in a book that nobody would know except you're in that person's mind. Like, what are those feelings? Like you said, how was sleeping that night? How was having to enter the world again after your stuff got turned upside down? If you've done jail time, how did you handle society? Like trying to empathize and get people to kind of relate on that personal level. I think those are the best kind of stories, because you can listen to interviews and technical details that every news outlet would ask anyway, because that's their formula. But getting those really nitty gritty details, and I imagine like these skills, some of the skills that you've learned from your interviewing have probably benefited you like in your day-to-day life, right? Like, I know when I started studying social engineering and things, those principles made my life exponentially better because I learned how to talk and how to listen to people. Have you found through the course of, now that you do this full time and are very, very skilled at it, has it changed you at all as a person from like episode 1 to episode, what are you on now, 45, 47,
Yeah,
whatever it is?
38. Yeah, I think so. I think being able to find what's interesting about a person and then to hone in on that, and just like here, like I meet someone new around town or something. One of the things I like to ask them is, what are you diving into on the internet these days? What rabbit holes are you going down on the internet? Like a brand new person I just met at a party or something, right? Like, tell me what rabbit holes you've been down, because I think everyone's going down some crazy rabbit hole these days, or learning about some weird new vitamin or a health craze or food or something. And that's really fascinating to hear, because this is like passions that people have. Like, man, I got so deep. And tell me all about it. What did you find at the bottom of the internet? so so yeah, I mean, these are questions I would never thought of before. And to hear how people experience some of the stuff, I don't. But I think if we back up a second, because there's something I think even more important. Before I was doing the podcast, I was blogging, and I was blogging specifically about firewall issues that I would have running a firewall that like Cisco didn't have documented, or something like, oh, well, there's the undocumented bug, or here's how to do this thing that nobody ever talked about or tried to figure out before, and it's just not on Google. So I would like write up these articles on how to do this really technical thing. And what I did, like I did this for like 7 years, and after 7 years of writing like really technical complex topics like quadruple natting and stuff like that, right? Like just
Oh,
ridiculous stuff. I got better at explaining complex topics simply. And this is somebody told me like a long time ago. I was probably some speaker at a security conference. Like, if you can explain complex topics simply, there's money in that. And I'm like, where is it? Because my blog is not making money, right? But I think this is where it is, this podcast, right? So after 7 years of typing out, like, how can I make this easier to understand? How can I make it easier to understand? And I just kept thinking about that in my head. Like I would try to explain a VPN to a non-technical person, and I would sit like for hours trying to think of the best analogy I could use on everything. And so, I really racked my brain on how to get things explained in simpler ways. And I think that really carries over into the podcast, because a lot of people are listening to the show that are not in the technical fields or security, and they still get a lot of value out of it. They hear things, they kind of go, I don't understand that, but then the story picks up again, and they get back into it. And so sometimes they listen to it twice to try to understand more of that technical part. But I think it's really valuable that I had blogged for 7 years trying to do that before getting into this.
Right, and this is an area I didn't think we'd go into, but yeah, that's some of the most valuable career advice that I give to people just coming in, and really, it's not even like just in like security or in tech. Is if you can bridge that gap between those who know and those who don't, and be able to explain super technical things to people who aren't technical, and find 100 different ways to do it, because everybody processes information differently, right? I mean, we both know that everybody has different emotional reactions to things, and they learn differently. They get frustrated differently. They celebrate differently. And if you can do that, that's a golden ticket of being able to be that like human utility knife to explain these things, which is also a good topic, because it's October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I just wrote something for my company about it. Getting that human connection, and being able to explain those types of very complicated things. Which is why I loved your podcast so much, because it did have that very NPR-esque storytelling of technical, and I remember thinking I could not even be a hacker, and I would understand at least 80% of this and enjoy it. So I think your reach is much farther than probably even you realize. Somebody asked another question. Does Grizzly Mittens ask, does Jack sometimes distort technical details during a story? I guess maybe asking like, do you purposely distort some technical details, like just in case somebody tries to mimic something, or maybe to like hide true source or something like that? You find yourself having
Oh,
to
I
do that?
see. You know what? I don't think I do try to do that. Not specifically. That's one of those things, right? Like the fire can bring us warmth and heat and cooking, but it also can burn us and cause catastrophic failure. And I'm not the one who's going to tell everyone how to use fire, right? So here's how the hacker got in, and I don't mind getting geeky and nerdy about like the specifics of it. But there are times where I'll gloss over details, where I'll say like, oh yeah, so the hacker cloned the website, and that's really easy to do, and I won't explain now, but really,
Right.
if I wanted to, I could just say, well, they used the social engineering toolkit, and they went in, and it's a couple clicks where you just, it's a command line tool, and you hit number 1, and then you hit number 3, and then you tell what website to clone, and then it takes a minute and it does it, and then there you go, you've got a cloned website. Like I could go into those details, but I just kind of say, no, he cloned the website. So I do gloss over things when I could go deeper, and I just don't know what the best. It all comes down to like the value add. Like if I go into every single part of the technical part of this hack, that kind of gets boring at some point. So I've got to have this balance of like, let's keep the story moving, and at the same point, I'll throw in bits of technical detail for you to kind of pick up one or two things along the way. I hope everyone listening learns something as they're listening, no matter what level you're at in the technical world.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Like it's like there are 100 different ways of somebody with to follow up, like how to use Kali and how to use Dirtbuster and all these kinds of things. But no, I think you strike a really great balance doing that. So having either, depending on how you look at it, the advantage or burden of knowledge, which can influence our personal biases, right? Or like that gut instinct inside of us that just says this smells wrong, or I don't, something doesn't feel right about this. Angus Red asks, have you ever heard of a story, did all this research, and then just decided to not publish because you just felt like it was BS? Like something in you just was like, my spidey sense just says no. Or do you reach a threshold of research where you can, even if your gut's kind of telling you, I'm not sure, that you'll publish it?
Well, I'm learning which journalists are more trustworthy than others, I'll say. And so what, over time, like there was this one time where I saw, I don't remember what episode it was, but it was quite an interesting allegation that was on Wikipedia, and I was like, "There's no way that's true." And so I clicked on the link that went, the source for it, and it was like the National Enquirer had already written an article on this, and I'm like, "There's no way the National Enquirer is getting this story right. Like they're the only ones with this part of this corner of the story. Like this is not true." So I did not. I just have to throw out a lot of things that come my way that are potentially for the story. But then when I look into it, I'm like, yeah, there's not enough here. This is the only this one place that's the source is just not good enough for me. So I'll learn to trust journalists with kind of a grain of salt and try to fact check what they're doing by calling up some of some of the sources in the story and stuff like that to say, hey, this is what this journalist is saying. Is there any truth to it? And actually do my own research independently as well. And unfortunately, a lot of that stuff gets missed in the episode because we're just talking about the story, right? But my goodness, there's so much that I have to do to get certain things just sorted out and get figured out. And there's some times where I call the right person and they're like, no, 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 none of that is true. And here's all the evidence showing why. And that helps me a lot. And then there's sometimes where I've got two people just totally arguing with each other, like, no, here is the absolute truth, and the other person saying, nope, that's all lies, here's the truth. And I'm like, well, what do I do now? So it's really hard to cut through and get to the truth on a lot of things.
Have you run into, or how often have you run into, like has your own personal bias or your own personal whatever, call belief system or whatever, but just your own personal thing of like, God, I personally hate this person, or like, or I don't agree with what they did, and you almost get combative about it.
Oh my god! So this is probably my second biggest fear: is bringing on someone on the show that I didn't like check them enough, their tweets,
Right.
to see if they're total jerk.
Right.
And I just brought on someone that I should not have like ever given them any sort of exposure at all. And here I go with a whole episode, like, oh my gosh. So I am really scared of that. And so I really I've unfortunately I spent a lot of time looking through the drama of InfoSec to see like who's the asshole this week, and
I have a list.
try to like avoid them for a while, or at least take note. And yeah, it's really fascinating to see all the drama just amongst ourselves, right? Like some people just can't seem to be nice to others.
That actually gives me like an idea to make kind of like a security stock ticker, and people can visit it or like put it on their desktop that just gets the ranking assholes that week. And it just kind of, or like put it at the bottom of like a Twitch stream and have some kind of like AI machine learning that analyzes words in their tweets, and if they're combative enough, like they get ranked.
Yeah, so I have some people who are like very prominent in like Twitter and stuff that I call every now and then and like, okay, look, I'm thinking about using this person in my show. Are they okay or what?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to. I mean, and plus that's a really good tool to wield, because we make our reputations. It takes a long time, but it's so quickly to just burn them down.
Yeah.
So we got like 10 minutes left, but like I could fucking talk to you for hours, man. But it's one of those like quality over quantity. How do you, Jack, as a person, wind down? Right, you've done your research, you have your shows lined up, and you've probably up at all hours and fact checking and checking again and talking to people. Like, what do you do just to relax, man?
Dude, I don't think anyone's good at it, right? Like we're in bed with looking at a screen. Like that's not a wind down. That's a stay up late. That's looking for some stupid, I don't know what we're looking for online, right? It's a laugh or something. And even when we get it, it's not enough. We want the next laugh. So I don't have a good solution to that. I'd like to say I play video games, and but I don't know if that's giving me enough satisfaction these days. I went through after doing the Xbox episode, I went through and played Halo 1 all the way through. And now I'm trying to get through Half-Life 2. I don't know why I chose this one. I like to find games that are tried and true, that have been around for a long time and everyone loves it, instead of trying to get on the new game that may or may not be good. I'm not like that kind of person. I'm an old adopter, a late bloomer on these video games. So I might go for Skyrim later on this year, and These are the old games that I like playing.
Hold on for 1 second. I gotta close my door because my kid is like everywhere. God, I got so close to this whole podcast. Yeah, man. Like sometimes I almost go the other way of like I relax so much and then nothing gets done at all, and then everything just falls through the absolute cracks.
I think what would be better is if I were to go on more trips and just, I don't know, adventures around, like hiking or something, bicycling.
Right, but then you gotta like be outside. There's bugs, and
Yeah, I
bears.
like outdoors. It's
Yeah.
fine.
What's what actually got you started like doing like the whole broadcasting like bug? Like what got you like, hey, I'm gonna create a podcast and I'm gonna start talking about things.
I mean, like for years, I loved, Radio Lab, This American Life, all these like NPR shows, right? Because it's just amazing to sit in the car and be like, this is so good. Why am I not getting out of the car? I'm here where I'm supposed to go. Like this, I can't get out. This is so good. I got to stay. So I'm like, that's so powerful. Let me like, I don't know. Like it just kind of all came together. Like there's not this show. This is a show I want to listen to, right? And I could not find it. I looked and looked. I could not find something similar to DarkNet Diaries. So I'm like, I'll just make it myself because I'm really tired. Like I waited for years for someone to make it, and I was like, I'll just give it a try.
I'll just do it. Fine, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, and after just going back and forth in my head for like 9 months, I was like, all right, I'll try one episode and send it to 10 friends and see what they think, and if they like it, then make 4 and see what people think after that, and if they like it, I'll just keep going.
So like, do you have any numbers on listeners that you have now, or like geographic things?
Yeah, the latest episode got 160,000 downloads. So every episode's about that now, around 150, 160,000 downloads. Some are higher than that, but it doesn't sound like that much compared to like YouTube world, but that's quite a lot because people are really glued, right? They're like listening to every minute of it and staying tuned. So it's not like they pop in, check it out, and leave. Like, oh, it's not for me. They're there, and it's really interesting to have someone's attention for a whole hour. And then people say they binged through all 48 episodes in like a week, and I'm like, that's what
I did.
10 hours that you listen to me talk. That's insane.
I burned through all of them because I was traveling a lot, and then that's why I stopped listening. That's why I'm always like five episodes behind. We even have somebody in the chat who listens to you from Europe. Like that's crazy. Even if it was just one person, if you had 5 people listening to your podcast and one of them was in Europe, that's huge. Like that's great. There was one other question that I want to get to because somebody is actually that same dude from Europe. He had one question about. He said, my question's about the Xbox scene episode. Can you comment on what you think on the way it went through in the end, in the sense that there may be a little feeling that crime does pay sometimes, or it's just a case where life is even bigger than the movies? Like, what was your feeling on how that whole thing ended up?
Yeah, it's something I could not write. Like if I was a movie writer, I'd be like, no, that's a little bit too far-fetched. Let's not go with that ending. So it was so wild to hear that like that's how all these different people ended up. And there's after the end of episode 1, it was like 2-week wait for the next one, and there were all these people like, you're just glorifying hacking. This is you're gonna cause all these kids to like start hacking and stuff. And I'm like, okay, just wait till episode 2 because things just go so bad in episode 2, and the second part, right? And I don't know, like I'm not trying to judge on whether that was the right thing or the wrong thing or how things went. I just want to document that that's what happened, and that I'm still kind of processing it myself. Like, yeah, I think things could have been handled better, of course. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I don't have a good solid like opinion on if it was right or wrong or what, but things could definitely have gone better.
Yeah, I mean that's like I've definitely heard some of these things, and I'm like, well, hey, this ended up kind of okay. So, but like, totally not the rule, totally the exception, and it makes you think you can get away with some of this stuff, and especially just kind of the flippant way that some of those guys talked about that, or like the one those episodes that you had for Manfred and just speaking very matter-of-factly and just still didn't have any real regrets over what they'd done. And I'm like, oh, okay.
It's
But
really weird.
yeah,
And you listened to the one where you got a sneak preview on this one. So the next episode
yes.
that I'm gonna do is about Elliot Alderson on Twitter, and this guy has like 100,000 followers, and he's done some hacking, and has very much suffered almost no consequences for it.
Yeah.
That one's gonna come out, and that one really kind of short circuits my head on like what is going on here? How does this guy hack like crazy and not get in any trouble?
I feel very fortunate to have heard that one, and I'll listen to it again when it comes out. That one, I'll always remember where I was listening to that episode. I was walking to go get food, and I know exactly where I was. That one's really that's gonna twist. That's like you said, it's gonna twist some heads when you just hear how he speaks about it and what he's been able to do, and the fact that he's not in handcuffs yet. And I also thought it was pretty cool that I actually got to meet him inadvertently because I was gooning in the room you guys were going into for that talk.
That's when I met you. Is I was waiting for Elliot Alderson at DEF CON, and we met up and watched the talk together. So it was a fun meeting.
Yeah, and then he came up, and I was like, holy shit, am I dreaming? But anyway, man, it is getting towards the top of the hour. I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me, and thank you to everybody in the stream who sat and listened. I hope you guys found it really enjoyable. Hopefully, Jack, you'll come back on some point if I can keep this thing going.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Do you want to plug anything in particular?
DarkNetDiaries.com. If you haven't heard it, go check it out.
Cool. I've also got links up on the screen right now at Jack Rhysider, at DarkNet Diaries, and for the love of God, if you find any value out of this, and I guarantee you that the 20 or so people that were consistently in here all hour did, throw some cash his way, man, because like this stuff costs money. So I'm a Patreon, and very proud of it, and it gives you some cool extras. So I have that link up there, which is patreon.com/DarkNet Diaries. Jack, I'm gonna go off stream, but just hang out on Zoom for a second, all right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, everybody, guys, girls, everybody, every gender that has been in here, thank you so much. And I'll actually be back in an hour talking to Sir Spams-a-Lot about ShabbatCon, so that's going to be pretty cool, too. And now let's see if my new thing works. All right, see ya.